Okay, welcome back. We're going to work on 8-2 again, or I'm sorry, 8-1, part 2. We left off on number 14, where we're going to add a media query for a tablet in portrait view. So if you're working on, an iPad, for example, that's your tablet in portrait view. So vertical. So we're going to code a media query for the screen type that checks that the viewport width is 959 pixels or less. So that's about the size of a tablet. So over here on line 187 first, we're going to add in a comment that says this is mobile landscape to tablet portrait. And then 188, we use our @media only screen, and max width is our 767 pixels. Okay, so within this media query, we're going to change the image in the header so it doesn't float. So header, then image, float set to none. And we're going to center the contents of the header. So header, and then text align, center. So lines 189, 190. Number, let's see, where'd we go? Whoops, I think I jumped ahead to 16. I'm sorry. Back up to number 14. Let's back up to here. Tablet, portrait to standard 960. Okay. Then within this media query, we're going to reduce the font size for the H1 element in the section to 135. So looking in section, H1 font size is 135, 135%. The H2 and the aside to, so you can put a comma in between those. We get the font size is equal to set to 120%. Okay, so then you can test that, reduce the width, and then you can see the H1 and H2 headings of the section and the aside should change. All right, so we already went over number 16. That's down here, your float, your header, and your text align. So line 17 tells you when you test it, it looks pretty good, but the line length in this section is starting to get too short. So in number 18, we're going to change the section and the aside. So line 191 and 195 down here, so that they don't float. So set on line 192, float to none. Under aside, 196, float none. Okay, and then you're going to set the right padding for the aside so that it is the same as the left padding. So the left padding is 2.5%, so you want to set the right padding to be the same. All right, and then it gives you the calculation underneath. And then set the widths of the section and the aside by subtracting the left and right padding from 100%. Okay, so the width, if you take the 100% minus double the 2.5, which is 5, then you get 95%. So line 193, section width is going to be 95% of whatever the size of the screen is. And then on line 198, again, the aside width will be 95% of whatever size of the screen. Okay, let's see. Number 19, you're going to test the page. You're going to notice that the image in the article is still too big. You're going to fix that by changing the maximum width of that image to 30%. Okay, so down here on line 200, we are in the article and we're looking at the image tag. And what do we want to do? Set the max width property to 30%. Okay, then you're going to test it again and you should see that the image is not too big. It resizes with the size of the page. All right, number 20, to improve the formatting for the aside, display the speakers in 2 columns. So when you're looking at it now, you'll notice that the speakers are stacked one on top of each other. Well, we want to now make those into 2 columns, basically. So in order to do that, we're going to add a div around everything in the aside except the H2 elements. Then we can set the column count property to 2. Okay, so what we need to do is we're going to set a div. So let's go back over to our index.html page, down to our aside. Let's see. Keep going. Here we go. All right, so on line 80, so it says everything except the H2. So we want to keep that out of it because guest speakers, we don't want it to align with one column or another. So starting with line 80, we're going to put in a div. So it's just div means divider. We're going to set that ID, give it an ID name, and set that equal to speakers. And you'll notice at the very bottom, after those speakers on line 89, we need to close out that div. All right, so now we can use the speaker ID. So back over to our CSS, we can see here underneath our image where we changed that to, or added in 30%. On line 201, we used a hashtag representing an ID, the name speakers, and then we have column-count and set that to 2. So we want to have 2 columns. Don't worry so much about line 202 and 203 right here. So column count 2. All right, then you're going to test it. And what you should see is when you resize this to about the size like that, you'll see that the speakers are all in a column. The title guest speakers is not inside those 2 columns. All right. Okay, number 21. You're going to add a media query for a phone that's in portrait orientation instead of landscape. Okay, so down here on 217, we're going to put in a little comment that says mobile portrait to mobile landscape. We're going to code the media query for the screen type that the checks that the viewport width is 479 pixels or less. So meaning the max width is 479. And then we want to change the base font size to 90. Okay, so when we say the base font size, that means everything that's on the body, everything that's going to show up on that device, that computing device, whether it's a laptop, tablet, or a phone. And that's in our body tag. So we want to set that, take that element body and set the font size to 90%. All right, 22 says when you reduce the width of the page to less than 480 pixels, all of the font sizes should be reduced. This illustrates the advantage of using relative sizes for fonts. So rather than setting an absolute pixel size for the font or an M or whatever, if we do 90%, then it's more of a fluid, what they call fluid rather than fixed. Okay, now number 23. It says we're going to add a mobile menu using the Slick Nav plugin. Okay, so it says to use figure 812 as a guide. So let me pull that up. I have that page open right here. So this 812 shows you the Slick Nav plugin that you're going to put in the head element. So it tells you to put in link and all of this right through here. And then it gives you script tags that you're also going to add in the head element. So notice you have an open script here, and then it has a closing script at the end. It uses jQuery. This is a special library of JavaScript code, so we're going to add a little functionality here. The next line is another script, open tag. It tells you the source of that. That's our slick nav.min.js. JS stands for JavaScript. You close that script tag. And then you have a third one. So opening script right here, closing down here. And then inside you've got some JavaScript. Don't worry about this. Fortunately, we get to have another class that goes over all of this. But just know that it's talking about the nav menu. It uses this ID. So we can see the hashtag, so ID equals nav menu there. we're going to use the slick nav, and then it's going to do something for us. So let's go back over here to our heading section of our index page. So let's go back all the way up to the top. And so you can see here that we've got our links here for the slick nav on line 11. We add that link in there. We add the 3 scripts. There's 1, there's 2, and there's 3, just like it was in the book. So that's all you need to do is to follow that. Okay, and then you're going to add, let's see, yep, the slick nav menu, yes, okay. Then it says to add a nav element before the nav element for the navigation menu and give it an ID of mobile menu. Okay, so let's go down to where our nav menu is. So right here on line 27, this is where you're going to add your nav and then give it an ID called mobile menu. All right, so then you're going to add another script element like the one in figure 812 that includes the jQuery for calling the slick nav menu. Okay, so let's go back over here. Then we've got, let's see where that is. Okay. You'll see that you'll get to have a lot of things on here by the time you're done. You've got a ton of things and you have to go through all of them. All right. So next thing we do is look at where you were before on line 14 is the script that is going to include the jQuery that's going to call the nav menu. So right in here is where it's calling that. All right, so on 26, it says to add a style rule outside the media queries that hides the mobile menu. So let's go back over to our styles. And when it says to hide that mobile menu, that means we want to not have it display. So on line 206, we use the ID nav menu and just set the display to none. Okay, then add 3 style rules in the media query for a phone in landscape. So make sure we're in our landscape, mobile landscape. That the first one should hide the standard navigation menu. The second one should display the mobile menu. Okay, so right here, display block, mobile menu. And then the third one should set the background color of the mobile menu to 8 followed by 5 zeros. So slick nav menu, set the background color to, as you can see if I hover over it, it's a red. Using the slick nav menu class, so line 212. You're going to test that and notice that the mobile menu still has its default background color of dark gray. To change that, add an important. So the exclamation important declaration to the declaration for the background color and then test it again. Okay, so when you test it there, you should see that you've got your background color all in red here and see how it pops down like that. Okay, gives it just a little functionality using the JavaScript. Okay, and then you're going to use the developer tools to test the page, and this kind of walks you through that. I'm not going to go through each one because by this time you know how to use the developer tools. You've used them over and over. Just as it's in Chrome, you're going to press F12. It's going to give you the tools in the pane at the bottom. It's helpful if you open your browser as wide as you can, then you have more area to do with your tools. Okay, so that is 8-1. Hope this is helpful.